right now I'm going to have to leave the meeting to
Okay.
get ready to go. It's also the day my 9-year-old granddaughter died, and I'm making a post, and I have to take some more pictures. So.
Yeah, right now I'm going. All right. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much, and we'll be back on the class very soon, and we'll
Prabhu is here.
hopefully be reading.
Obeisances to you, Rupanuga Prabhu. Thank you for coming. You look like, remember that Kilroy joke where you just see his nose?
Oh.
And Kilroy was here.
How's that?
Yeah, I know he's here. Hari Prabhu.
My obeisance.
Okay, we're going to leave the meeting right now, and we'll
Okay.
be back. Okay, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
We have the book,
Oh, here's
that
the book.
edition of we were telling you, Bhavatarini was telling you about.
Right. Thank you. I'm just going to
Okay.
start chanting the Six Goswami.
Okay.
Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro Vartan Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro Premamritam Bonidhi Dhira dhira jana priyo priyapkaro Nirmatsaro pujito Shri Chaitanya kripa baro bhuvi bhuvo Paravahantarako Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipuno Sadharma Lokanam hitakarano tribhuvane Manyo sharanyakaro Nana shastra vicharanaika nipuno Sadharma samstapako Lokanam hitakarano tribhuvane Manyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padara Vinda Bhajanan Andena Matalako Radha Krishna Padara Vinda Bhajanan Andena Matalako Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako
Hare, beautiful.
Welcome. First verse translation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They are just like the ocean of love of God, and they are popular both with the gentle and with the ruffians, because they are not envious of anyone. Whatever they do, they are all pleasing to everyone, and they are fully blessed by Lord Chaitanya. Thus they are engaged in missionary activities meant to deliver all the conditioned souls in the material universe. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. So Rupanuga Prabhu, thank you so much for coming. I asked many devotees to come this evening, and it seems that Friday night many have all kinds of things going on, so I can't promise how many will come tonight, but at least we have our god sister Rasangi here all the way from California. Jai. I was just wondering, Rupanuga, when you heard these two verses sung by Srinivasacharya in glorification of the six Goswamis, was there any thoughts that come to you when you hear those translations?
I suppose the main thought is that I feel very fortunate to be even discussing this. This is the most important instruction in this book from Rupa Goswami. And Srila Prabhupada named me after Rupa Goswami. I wish I could live up to that as a follower of Rupa Goswami. I think reading this book has a great effect upon us to make us more humble. If it serves that purpose, I think it's successful. Because humility is absolutely required. That's why Lord Chaitanya speaks of it in his first six shastra, to chant the holy name in a humble state of mind. And so that humility has to be developed. In my opinion, one way to develop is to read the humility of the previous acharyas in the songbook, because even though they're very advanced, exalted personalities, they write as if they're conditioned souls for our instruction. And you know what Srila Prabhupada said? It was astonishing. He said, they're not just pretending for our instruction, they actually feel like that. And that becomes inconceivable.
Yes.
Such exalted personalities can actually feel that humility. So I think by being in their company, we can develop some humility because of that. Just like Srila Prabhupada says, if you're really angry, think about Nrsingadev and your anger pales in comparison. So I think that it's the secret of association of transcendental time, transcendental sound and place, and time and space. I think that's the way it develops.
Thank you. You mentioned
you're
go ahead.
recording, right, Prabhu?
Yes, Rasangi. Yeah, I was just thinking, Rupanuga Prabhu, in relation to your name, since the departure of Srila Prabhupada, the term Prabhupada Anuga has developed. I was wondering, what were your thoughts on that? Are we Rupanugas? Are we Prabhupada Anugas? Or are we both?
Srila Prabhupada said we're all Rupanugas.
Huh.
We're all Rupanugas. I think Prabhupada Anuga is a concoction myself.
Uh-huh.
I don't find that anywhere. I don't find that anywhere in Srila Prabhupada's instructions or books, any place. We can combine various Sanskrit terms. We can create our own suffixes and prefixes. We can do things like that, but that's not what is required. Required is to be Rupanugas, like Srila Prabhupada said. He didn't say, I want you all to be Prabhupada-nugas.
Uh-huh.
We're that automatically, because we're getting, listen, whatever we got from Srila Prabhupada. This book is from Srila Prabhupada. This translation from Srila Prabhupada. Everything's coming from Srila Prabhupada. So we're Srila Prabhupada-nugas every moment. But he's trying to teach us to be Rupanugas.
So even though out of affection and love for Prabhupada, someone may come up with the term Prabhupada Nuga, perhaps that's just sentimental? Is that what you're...
Yes, I believe that. I believe that whatever terms we come up should be the same terms that Goswamis used or previous acharyas used. We're not in a position. I remember Srila Prabhupada told us once not to try to write songs or prayers initially until we become advanced. He said, first of all, read the songs and prayers of the acharyas. That's your duty. And due time, automatically or spontaneously, you'll be able to do something on your own. But first of all, don't try to write or poems or songs. Just first of all, try to understand from the acharyas.
Thank you. We have our god sister with us tonight, Raga Bhumi Devi Dasi, all the way from Brazil. She helped to translate Srila Prabhupada's books into Portuguese.
Haribo.
Thank
I never forget my visit to Sao Paulo, and that was there was a big TV show there that was popular all over the country, and they actually shipped us down there from New York, and we had a kirtan. I remember walking out on the stage, and the people were already trained to yell and chant. You know, they weren't chanting; it was a roar. You know, like we were some great soul or something. And it was all almost like canned laughter. But that's the way they treat us, very, very nicely. And we chanted, and we actually had a chance to go out on the street. It was a long time ago. We went. I don't remember the details, but I remember being mobbed on the street and separated from the other kirtan devotees by the crowds who we were just 20 or 30 feet apart. You know, and Bhardaraj was playing in that Mridanga. I could hardly hear him, but anyway, it was really a nice reception.
That was in the 70s?
70,
Yes, it was.
70, I'm not sure when. I just remember let's see, it was before the Susskind show, I think. Anyway, I was about 72 or something like that.
So you have very good memories. Yes, go on.
I felt that it's been a great mistake by the government, the USA government, for not developing much more of a confidential and friendly relationships with South America, instead of spending so much time in Europe, which hasn't really paid off so much. But we have all the resources and all the people there, and I've always felt there was neglecting a very great, like Brazil. Brazil is practically half the size of South America, and to neglect a country of such size and resources has always seemed to me a diplomatic mistake. I think if we had resources now, more of a relationship with South America, the economic situation would be a lot different. That's my opinion. No, just to neglect the people with a great history, a big history. Sincere of Catholicism and sincere following of religion. These people have been there, and it's a shame that they were neglected. That's my opinion. I'm sorry about it.
Bhagabhumi, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I have a little difficult to understand what he was saying, but I know that he came to Brazil, to Rio de Janeiro. He was invited by TV. I don't think it's in our biography, about Krishna consciousness in Brazil. Start to talk about them. I think it was not just him; somebody else came also. And
he said Bhardaraj came also.
They were on the elephants.
Yes,
riding?
on the elephant. Yes.
You went on an elephant.
They couldn't get me. They couldn't get me on the elephant. I would do it, but one of the Maharaji's went up on the. I forget who it was. I have to think. If I knew I was going to talk about this, I would have thought a bit more about it. But anyway, the other thing it reminded me of was the reception we got in the streets. I couldn't speak Portuguese, of course, and I had a translator, and I was speaking from the Ishopanishad, and the people were so receptive. They were practically silent while I was speaking. I had to speak slowly, of course, but it was being translated properly, and I was just so impressed.
You mean you stopped the Harinam for a moment and then gave the speech like we?
No. We had the opportunity to go downtown a few times.
Okay.
We were there for, I think, 4 or 5 days, and they took care of all the expenses and everything. We had on free time. We took the opportunity to go out on the street. At least I did. I remember going out with a translator. I think I went out alone, and I took advantage of that because I wanted to get out and see the people.
And you gave the speech at the temple or
No, I was speaking in the street.
On the street, Sri Upanishad.
Yes.
We don't have
Sorry?
We don't have temple at that time.
Okay.
No, there was no temple. No.
No temple.
No devotees had been there before that.
But not temple. Just we meet in the somebody else's house or apartment. But the temple started around 1973 when the Hawaii devotee came to Brazil. But you came, I think, what's his name? Forgot his name. And the Hanuman came also, and the Brishman, and the devotee from Hawaii, the leader there.
Siddhasarup?
Some devotee. Yes, yes. And also, I don't remember his name. I just saw his picture today. Prabhupada disciple, very close to Srila Prabhupada. He came to Brazil. It happening around 1970 and 1972, because I joined in 1973, and you have a temple on the top of the hill. So Rupanuga came before it.
Yes.
I don't know who. I don't know if he meets some devotee when he came here. He did?
No, I didn't meet any devotees. There were no, as far as I knew, there weren't any devotees. I
Okay.
must have been 71, I guess. I didn't meet anyone there who was already
Yeah,
practicing.
but you planted the seeds.
I don't know about that.
Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, those two places.
I
that
don't
right?
remember going. I don't remember going to Rio. I just remember Sao
No.
Paulo. I think that's where the TV. That was a TV broadcast from there.
Okay.
Oh, São Paulo, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're on verse number 6.
Nice to meet you.
I thought we were on 5.
We did 5 last week.
Oh, you told me
Yeah.
5.
Well, we can go back if if you were looking at 5. We can do it again.
No. I haven't looked at Nectar the instruction for a long time. This is giving me an opportunity. But you told me 5, so but you say we're on 6.
Yeah, we did 5 last week, so we're on 6 this week.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll just read the Sanskrit, and then you can start after I chant the Sanskrit. Rupanuga Prabhu. Drishtai swabhava janitaira vapushascha doshair na prakritatvam iha bhakta janasya pashyet gangam basam na kalu buddha pena pankar brahma dravatvam apagachati niradharmai. Synonyms: drishtai, seen by ordinary vision; swabhava janitai, born of one's own nature; vapushaha, of the body; cha, and doshai, by the faults; na, not; prakritatvam, the state of being material; iha, in this world; bhakta janasya, of a pure devotee; pashyet, one should see; ganga ambasam, of the Ganges waters; na, not; kalu, certainly; Buddha, pena pankai, by bubbles, foam, and mud; Brahma dravatvam, the transcendental nature; apagachati, is spoiled; niradharmai, the characteristics of water. So we're each reading. There's only 9 paragraphs to this chapter, this text. So if we each read a paragraph, and if someone needs to ask a question or make a comment, then we can move on. So if you'd like to start, Rupanuga Prabhu, with the translation.
Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee's having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee. But despite such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. It is exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The Ganges waters do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in their spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water.
Ragabhumi, you read the next paragraph, please.
1 minute.
Are you able to read?
Purport?
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Shuddha Bhakti, the activity of the soul proper. In other words, engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord is performed in a liberated condition. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, one who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus become to the level of Brahman.
Daneshwar Prabhu, you're next. What I did is I pulled up the purport to this verse just so we can understand it a little more. Would you like to read that, please?
Okay, starting from here, this verse.
Yeah.
This verse is a reply to Arjuna's third question. What is the means of attaining to the transcendental position? As explained before, the material world is acting under the spell of the modes of material nature. One should not be disturbed by the activities of the modes of material nature. Instead of putting one's consciousness, his consciousness, into such activities, he may transfer his consciousness to Krishna activities. Prabhu, I'm sorry, explain to me, because it's you switched something. Is this the same purport?
Not the
This-
same purport.
This is the purport to 1426.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't get that. Okay.
Oh, okay. So you got that printed from somewhere else. It's
Yeah,
not in the-
because-
Cross-referencing it. That's all.
it's not in the book, so I
Well-
got lost here.
Okay.
Okay.
Krishna activities are known as Bhakti Yoga, always acting for Krishna. This includes not only Krishna, but his different plenary expansions, such as Rama and Narayan. He has innumerable expansions. One who is engaged in the service of any of the forms of Krishna or his plenary expansions is considered to be transcendentally situated. One should also note that all of the forms of Krishna are fully transcendental, blissful, full of knowledge, and eternal. Such personalities of Godhead are omnipotent and omniscient, and they possess all transcendental qualities. So if one engages himself in the service of Krishna or his plenary expansions with unfailing determination, although these modes of material nature are very difficult to overcome, he can overcome them easily. This is already explained in the 7th chapter. One who surrenders unto Krishna and once surmounts the influence of the modes of material nature. To be in Krishna consciousness or in devotional service means to acquire the equality of Krishna. The Lord says that his nature is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. And the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme, as gold particles are part of a gold mine. Thus, the living entity's spiritual position is as good as gold, as good as Krishna in quality. The difference of individuality continues. Otherwise, there is no question of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means that the Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the activity of exchange of love between the Lord and the devotee is there. Therefore, the individuality of two persons is present in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the individual person. Otherwise, there is no meaning to Bhakti Yoga. If one is not situated in the same transcendental position with the Lord, one cannot serve the Supreme Lord. To be a personal assistant to a king, one must acquire the qualifications. Thus, the qualification is to become Brahman, or freed from all material contamination. It is said in the Vedic literature, Brahmaiva san Brahmapyeti. One can attain the Supreme Brahman by becoming Brahman. This means that one must qualitatively become one with Brahman. By attainment of Brahman, one does not lose his eternal Brahman identity as individual soul.
Thank you. Nanda Patni, would you like to continue from Avyabhi Charini Bhakti? Is it on the screen?
Yep, I was muted.
It's on the
Patni?
Avyabhicharini bhakti means unalloyed devotion. A person engaged in devotional service must be free from material motives. In this Krishna consciousness movement, one's consciousness must be changed. If consciousness is aimed toward material enjoyment, it is material consciousness. And if it's aimed towards serving Krishna, it's Krishna consciousness. A surrendered soul serves Krishna without material considerations. Anya Balashitas Shunyam, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.1.11. Jnana Kamajjanavritam, unalloyed devotional service, which is transcendental to the activities of the body and the mind, such as jnana, mental speculation, and karma, fruitive work, is called pure bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is the proper activity of the soul. And when one actually engages in unalloyed, uncontaminated devotional service, he's already liberated. Sagunan samadhijaitam, Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Krishna's devotee is not subjected to material condition, even though his bodily features may appear materially conditioned. One should therefore not see a pure devotee from a materialistic point of view. Unless one is actually a devotee, he cannot see another devotee perfectly. As explained in the previous verse, there are three types of devotees: Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. The Kanishta Adhikari cannot distinguish between a devotee and a non-devotee. He's simply concerned with worshipping the deity in the temple. A Madhyama Adhikari, however, can distinguish between the devotee and the non-devotee, as well as between the devotee and the Lord. Thus, he treats the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the devotee, and the non-devotee in different ways.
Nuga Prabhu, any thoughts come up for you in the paragraph that Nanda Patni just read on this section?
Of course. So I was thinking that the real difference for us practically is the difference between preaching and not preaching. This is a preaching movement. It starts at the Madhyamadikar level. We skipped the Kanishta level. Although this may apply to an individual's realization, as far as the movement is concerned, it left it left the Kanishta Adhikari stage in the dust. Because the first thing we did was go out in the street, have kirtan, and preach whenever possible. I remember being out on the corner of 8th Street and 2nd Avenue with a rug and a harmonium and madanga and cartels, and just for hours, just chanting and distributing. I think maybe we had a few pamphlets. Who is crazy, for example, and we handed those pamphlets out. We didn't have Gita yet, not until much later. So the real point is that we were taken out on this under the in the Tompkins Square Park and other places we would go from the beginning, even though we had no deity. We had hardly a book, but it all started out with the public.
You just skipped over Kanishta Adhikari and went right to Madhyam.
Yes. See, Kanishta, that's Gaudiya Math. That's where they were, because they remained in India. But Shubhaba came out to the rest of the world. That's starting the movement on the Madhyam platform. He didn't start it in India. He started in America for that reason, for the preaching reason. Preaching in India is a piece of cake. The people there come from a spiritual culture, and everyone born in India is 50% Krishna conscious automatically. So the job's half done. But they come to America where Srila Prabhupada was very doubtful about being received or not being received is a different story. Preaching outside of India is a different story. Because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted that. He wanted it out of India, to every town and village outside of India. You see.
In one lecture, Prabhupada was saying, if I tell them no illicit sex, no gambling, no meeting, no intoxication, they will say, Swami, go home.
No, please go home. Please go home.
Let's go.
That's what he said. Please go home. And it was very difficult. I mean, it was very difficult. These things are like the pillars of success in America. So it was Srila Prabhupada was giving us the opposite. So you can see that the way it worked was simply by his presence. He created, like Lord Buddha, faith in the faithless. We had nothing, we didn't know what to have faith in. But by his example and by the transcendental sound coming from his lotus lips, we were able to follow these instructions.
Any comment from you, Jivan Mukta Prabhu? Thank you for coming. You're muted.
No, sorry, I just unmuted myself. Hare Krishna. My only comment would be that there's a large spectrum. If we want to say that we skipped the Kanishta level, there's a large spectrum of Madhyam. You know, there's devotees that may be on Madhyam, but they're very, very close to the bottom of the scale. And, you know, they're just new. Their faith isn't very strong. They can go out and preach, but they're imitating and they're inspired by Srila Prabhupada, but their faith is still very, very weak. And they're out preaching. I mean, I've had experience with bhaktas when I was the Sankirtan leader. You know, they would go out preach, they would do Harinam, but their faith was very weak. And very easily their minds were disturbed and you know, they were very easily inclined to lose faith. So, I mean, if we want to say that they were Madhyam, okay, we can say they're Madhyam because they're preaching, but very barely Madhyam in the sense that maybe they were imitating the preaching devotees, you know, those who had strong faith. Just like you can have, you know, people chant Hare Krishna and, you know, they imitate those who are chanting purely. That doesn't mean they're chanting purely. So
I was just
I
trying to
understand. It's not like the devotees were like just stuck in the temple, not preaching. I mean, everyone in the movement was considered to go out and preach. So in that sense, yeah, I could see, you know, if you want to call them Madhyamadacharis, but from the sense of actual realization and faith, I think that'd be stretching it.
Well, I have to disagree because that beginning was different. It wasn't a question of time, building up faith over a period of time. Srila Prabhupada injected us with faith. He created faith that wasn't there. It was not a question of advancing from Kanishta to Madhyam and so on, so on, so on. The situation was different as time went on, you know, as expanded, but initially, we had so much faith, so far. We had so much faith. We had to leave the association of persons. We had to be different, you know, on the subway to work or at the office. One day I went in wearing tilak, and the administrator called me in. You can't wear that here. I said, why not? I never go down to intake. I never see the clients. Why not? This is my religion. And he says, you can't do that. I said, well, we have freedom of religion in this country. And so he said, wait, so he called another welfare center. He said, are the other people like you in our department? I said, yes. And so at such and such a welfare center in Manhattan. Sassroop was working there. So he called the administrator there and said, you have somebody there wearing this. The next thing I know, he looked at me and hung up the phone and said, you can go.
Jai, victory.
Well, what I'm saying is, it was, on the way to the subway, people would walk up to you, what's wrong with your hand? What's wrong with your hand? Because I had a bead bag.
Hand in the bead bag.
So, this was so brand new. We couldn't have done it without a lot of faith that was created in us. It wasn't a matter of time. I mean, I met Srila Prabhupada in October, the middle of October. By the end of the month, I was initiated. Not out of sentiment. I was completely convinced. I never lost it. I was completely convinced then. In fact, if I hadn't have been convinced, I couldn't have gone to Buffalo. I couldn't have gone there. I couldn't have gone there and just approach these college students out of nowhere. So there's a difference. There's just a difference. I think the difference is that we've seen over a period of time, the faith is harder to achieve without Srila Prabhupada. But with him, it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy. So there's a little difference there. I know there's a sequence that goes from Kanisha to Madhyam and so on. But one thing is, when you act on the platform with knowledge and conviction, it works. And the persons he's describing have come, when there's so much there, and maybe their conviction wasn't as strong. And maybe because Srila Prabhupada, he hasn't been here since 77. But then, and for the next 10 years, Srila Prabhupada was very, very strong. And the GBC was strong. And they were very carefully supervised by Srila Prabhupada. He was the real chairman. Everything we did had to be approved by him.
Right.
So he was personally engaged in so many ways. And with him there, faith could be maintained.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something there?
1 second. Dinesh has had his hand up for a long time. Are you able to come on camera, Dineshwar? Can we can see the quality of the sound. It'd be nice to see you instead of the black box.
I'm sorry, I have a weak connection. So, when I see you, you don't hear me.
I get it. Please go ahead and make your point, Prabhu.
Well, my point was a little off topic, so let Rasangi go for it. Or, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, let's stay on topic.
Sorry.
Let's stay on topic.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, Rupanuga Prabhu, and I relate to it so much because I remember when I finally joined. It took me a number of years to actually join, and I joined in Vancouver. And I think the second day I was there, I was kind of tossed out on the street with a bunch of Back to Godhead magazines. And we went out, every single day, 8, 10 hours, 14-hour days. And I totally agree so much with what you're saying, because the experience for me was that of being carried by Srila Prabhupada, even though I was reiterating or explaining to the public the most basic of the tenets of Krishna consciousness, but one's days and months and years were filled with doing that. I mean, that's what we were as book distributors. But when I look back on that particular period, as you're kind of characterizing it, I've always felt that I was entirely being carried by Srila Prabhupada in that mood. And now if I visit a local Gaudiya Math temple because I want to see the deity, I am struck entirely by the difference of that mood absolutely not being there. You know.
And you know what that mood was? That mood, that mood was the compassion that Srila Prabhupada had on non-devotees. It rubbed off on us. It rubbed off on us very thoroughly. And our faith was based on that association with Srila Prabhupada. He imbibed that concern. We had to be motivated. And he was recruiting. He was pulling us out of Maya.
I agree with that. So
I was so bold. Let me tell you, I was so bold. One day I was walking down the 2nd Avenue from the storefront toward my apartment, which was on East 7th Street, just 7 blocks away. And I was walking and I was thinking, I said out loud, I said, Maya, if you can show me something better than Srila Prabhupada's teaching us, please do it. I mean, I did that foolishly. Foolishly, but nothing happened. Nothing happened. I was expecting to be struck by a bolt of lightning or something, you know, to challenge my audacity. But I really felt that confident, that strong, that I would resist. I didn't care what it was. And here I'm walking past all my old haunts, you know, and you know, I was expecting what's going to happen, but nothing happened. That's how confident we were. We were, you had to be, because there was nothing like it before. We had never heard anything like it before. So where did that confidence come from?
Well, Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, by that association. I'll give you another example. I can show you a picture. I don't know. I don't want to get off the subject here, but I can show you a copy of what he posted on the wall in the storefront.
Right.
And, you want to see it? I'll take it off the wall. Somebody else. It'll take me a minute to get it. It's my next room, but someone else talk. I'll be right back.
I wanted to refer to Jivan Mukta Prabhu regarding your point, and that is, I've heard it explained that there's Kanishta, Kanishta Madhyam, Kanishta Uttam, and then Madhyam Kanishta, Madhyam Uttam. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah.
The idea is it's a continuum, you know, it's not like all of a sudden you come to a certain stage. It's a continuum. I mean, we all know devotees who've gone out on Sankirtan and distributed books and were in complete Maya. Like they were so weak, you barely hold them up, you know, and planning their rounds. So that's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's like, I think Prabhupada's movement starts at Madhyam. I definitely would agree with that. And that you have an opportunity to come to that and stay there, and with the faith that Prabhupada gave you to stay in that, on that level. But it depends on the modes that are controlling you. You know, it depends on your level of surrender, and it's a continuum. You know,
you're right. You're right, and the continuum goes from the bottom. Like I've always divided Madhyam into thirds. So when you reach the top third, you know, level what Srila Prabhupada says that, in fact, I think this Nectar devotion states that the Madhyamadikari cannot fall from his position because his faith is too firm.
Yes.
And he also mentions that Madhyamadikari can accept disciples from the Kanishta and the non-devotee platform. So there's a certain stage of Madhyamadikari where you can do that, even though you're not on the Uttama Adhikari platform. See this, and so the Madhyam stayed firmly fixed, you know, from whether lower stage, middle stage, or higher stage, and the movement's still on that platform, the platform of preaching. That distinguishes our sampradaya from all the other Vaishnava sampradayas.
Yeah.
So let me show you what I've got here.
Please.
Can you see this?
Yeah, just hold it up a little higher. Notice all initiated devotees must attend. Can you just move it over a little bit? Yeah, must attend morning and evening classes, must not be addicted to any kind of, and it's cut off if you move it a little bit more, of intoxicants, including coffee, tea, and cigarettes, They are forbidden to have illicit sex. What's the word after that? Illicit sex. What's the word after?
That they must
Behavior.
be
Behavior.
forbidden to have illicit sex. Oh, connection. This is
Or
sex connection.
connection.
Illicit sex connection must be strictly vegetarian. What is that word there? Should not. Should not.
Should not extensively mix with non-devotees.
Mm.
Should not eat foodstuff cooked by non-devotees. Should not waste time in idle talks, nor engage himself in frivolous sports. Should always chant and sing the Lord's holy names. Then Prabhupada writes in his own hand. But this is all his own hand. So
Awesome.
this
That's
was
wonderful.
put up on the wall in November. I was about after 3 weeks, 4 weeks I was there. I walked in one day and there it was. On the wall by the entrance to the hallway. And the other list next to that, which I can show you another time, was the 10 offenses. Now, one thing the reason I'm showing you this.
Is that the original? Is that the original one?
No, there's not a copy of this.
Yeah, I have a copy here somewhere, Jivan Mukta. Go on.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wanted you to see Srila Prabhupada's signature on the bottom. On the bottom, he says, "Thank you, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Acharya." Can you see that signature on the bottom?
Yeah.
You see how small that is? You see how that's an entirely different handwriting than Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's later. We're all familiar with his handwriting, how big and flowing and flowery.
Yeah.
That is so small. So what happened was Srila Prabhupada's handwriting expanded within a month or so. His signature on the letters was entirely different.
Huh.
So what I'm saying is there was an exchange between Srila Prabhupada and those early devotees that encouraged him in such a way that it showed up in his handwriting.
Huh. Interesting.
His handwriting actually expanded so much so I don't have a sample of his handwriting with me, but
Right, it's really big signature.
if I showed you next to it, you hardly would recognize this as Srila Prabhupada's signature. You think this is a forgery, you see. So I'm saying that's the dynamic. That was the dynamics of that time. That Srila Prabhupada was sort of like growing with us, as the movement started expanding. Remember, he's looking at us in storefront. Instead of seeing a bunch of older ladies in some Vedanta society, he sees a bunch of young men and women, young people, in their 20s, and he sees that, and he sees there's a response, and he's growing. His response, his power is growing, right? Because we're associating with him and offering our service. It's hard to explain. It's
a lovely point you're making. It's a really lovely point.
What's lovely about it? What do you like about it?
Well, you're talking about this reciprocation, which is so subtle when you're expressing it in that way. You're saying how Prabhupada himself was so encouraged by the eagerness of everybody at that time.
Yes.
Young followers.
And it was so, and it just sort of grew and grew and grew, didn't it? I mean, by Lord Chaitanya's mercy.
Yes.
Mm-mm.
Yes. We every day we have that Gayatri mantra. We say, let me try to understand my spiritual master, who is always a blissful Krishna consciousness. Let me meditate upon him being enthused as he has enthused us. Yes. And that enthusiasm is what I'm trying to describe.
Yeah. And you are.
And it has to be there. It really has to be there. And I believe, honestly, being observing from those days to now, that enthusiasm, the exchange with Srila Prabhupada has been greatly reduced.
Mm-hmm. So you met Srila Prabhupada in October of '66. When did Srila Prabhupada actually arrive?
He arrived in 1965, a year earlier than that.
Oh, okay. Yes, it was.
Yeah, he wasn't. He didn't.
When did he come?
What
month did he actually arrive?
I don't remember.
Okay.
The movement really began when he opened the storefront.
Right, and that was when? Do you know the time that opened?
A few months before I joined. Like
maybe in the summer or something?
I don't remember exactly. Okay. I used to pass the storefront on the way to work to catch the subway. When it was a Matchless Gifts, it was they had everything in the store is made of matches, and they call it Matchless Gifts.
Was that because it was made out of matches?
Yes, and so they went out of business because they were right on the very, very far edge of the Lower East Side, East Village. Just none of the people came down that far because right across the avenue, Houston Avenue, was or street, Houston Street, was Chinatown. So, and next to the temple was a gas station. So people didn't come down that far, and they couldn't manage to keep the business, so they closed. And the storefront was empty for a while.
Okay.
And one day I came by and I looked in the door, and there were, I thought, Buddhists in there, but they weren't. They were devotees.
And that was Mukunda that procured that, wasn't primarily? Was it Mukunda?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. He made those arrangements. Shilpaba had the money to had $200 before Mukunda even came. Shilpaba took every risk before anybody showed up. He was doing everything. He was doing book distributed. He was chanting. He was doing everything before we even saw what to do. He did it first.
Mm-hmm.
He distributed his Bhagavatams. That's how he lived. He was living by the sale of his Bhagavatams. In fact, I saw his Bhagavatams in the head shop before I met him, maybe a month or two before I met him. He had sold them to that head shop,
Huh.
which is a big hangout for the hippies.
Right. Black lights and psychedelic posters.
Yeah, and tie-dye T-shirts, all that stuff.
Daneshwar Prabhu's been very patient. He's had his hand up for a long time. Prabhuji?
Thank you. Practically, I forgot. No, I was just reflecting. Rupanuga was saying how he went to work with Tilak, and I also did that. When I was a new devotee, of course, I was working before I met the devotees, and so as I began coming to the temple, I was giving donations, which were considered generous by anybody's standards, because I would take prasadam there every evening after work. And so I figured, well, if I was eating out much, so I should put that much in the basket when they came around. And so then when the upstairs of that building became available, another floor became available, I was able to move in. And I wanted to quit by that time and just be a full-time devotee.
This was in
Quit my job.
This was in Gainesville?
Yeah. I wanted to quit my job, and Amarinda said, no, after I moved in, I was giving 50% of my paycheck because, of course, I was living in the temple and taking my food there. So I gave it 50%, maybe even more. I don't remember. And so when I wanted to quit my job, Amarendra, he said, no, your service is working. And he used Rupanuga as an example. That Rupanuga was working and also supporting the temple. So I had to keep doing that myself also. So I was having such a difficult time tearing myself out of Bhagavatam class in the morning to go to work. So, and then finally I figured, okay, well, I want to be a devotee, so I'm just going to be a devotee. So I left the temple, I had tilak on, and when I got to work, I just didn't take it off. And, but different story from Rupanuga's. When I went in, nobody said anything. And the tilaks there as plain as the nose on your face, right? And I'm sure they're looking at it, but nobody said a thing. And I continued to do that because, okay, I thought, well, maybe they'll fire me, they'll think I'm a weirdo.
Then you could go to Bhagavatam class every day.
Yeah, that was my idea, but they didn't fire me either. So I had to continue like that for some time. Anyway, it took a lot of guts for me to do that the first time. I had to just take a deep breath and go, okay, let's see where the chips fall. And so, but it was also fun to do that. So anyway, Rupanuga saying that just remind me of that. It was a fun experience. Wonderful time.
So Rupanuga Prabhu was your role model for wearing your tilak to work.
Yeah.
Cool. Jivan Mukta Prabhu, would you like to read the next paragraph, please? No one should criticize the bodily defects.
No one should criticize the bodily defects of a pure devotee. If there are such defects, they should be overlooked. What should be taken into account is the spiritual master's main business, which is devotional service, pure service to the Supreme Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:30, Api chet suduracharo bhajate mam ananyavak sadur eva chamantavya samyag vyavasito hisa. Even if a devotee sometimes seems to engage in abominable activities, he should be considered a sadhu, a saintly person, because his actual identity is that of one engaged in the loving service of the Lord. In other words, he is not to be considered an ordinary human being.
Thank you. Rupanuga Prabhu, any thoughts on this?
Yes, there's a similar comment in the Bhagavad Gita. But he also says, if he continues doing the misbehavior, then he's not to be considered a great devotee. In other words, there's a line to draw about behavior, especially in leadership. When the leadership behavior is not proper, then they're even more responsible.
Mm.
You see. So one has to draw the line, especially in the position of leadership. I mean, I can say that. To be frank, I was never actually part of the rank and file devotees from the very beginning. I always had responsibility. The first year was the closest, but I was working every day, so I wasn't around the storefront very much. The Srila Prabhupada gave certain responsibilities to me. Then when I went to Buffalo, I was on my own. And after that, I was always on my own. I was always in a position of leadership. So I was thinking that what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to do, especially when the GBC started, was to facilitate the devotion of the devotees to the cause, to Srila Prabhupada's cause, to give them as much as we could to Srila Prabhupada. It's very simple. So sometimes when I talk, but yet at the same time, I understand what it was like to be in the rank and file of the devotees. And I always felt the responsibility of leadership always to be a transparent medium for Srila Prabhupada and give them whatever we understood without changing it. See? And I think that's been the problem. The things have not been passed on very well. There are no secrets. You know, just like the GBC document, I have the original copy, and someone told me, well, it was hidden. Nobody ever distributed it. It was like kept a secret, but that's not true. It was intended for anyone that wanted to see it. So things were much more open in the early days. And that's isn't lamenting about, but it's nice to learn from the past.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever worked should continue to work. Whatever didn't shouldn't be repeated.
It seems to me, Prabhu, that during Prabhupada's presence, there was definitely, it seems like there's definitely more of a focus on maintaining and following strictly the standards and that Srila Prabhupada had established, repeating exactly what he says and how he said it and so on. It seems like after his disappearance that devotees have taken it upon themselves to kind of embellish a lot of things in their own ways. Just like, for example, I'm receiving some emails from Jayadvaita Maharaj. She's writing this book about kirtan and how, the rules of kirtan and how these days, it's like anything goes when it comes to kirtan as far as what's being chanted and the musical arrangements and so on. Seems to me, though, that during those early days, that the intent was, and it was almost understood by everybody, to maintain things exactly the way Prabhupada established them. Whereas now it's not like that at all.
No comment.
I'd like to make a comment to that, if I may. I was speaking with Vidura Prabhu this morning, a devotee that joined around 78 or something like that. And he was saying how he noticed in his local Birmingham ISKCON branch that they were telling new people, if you pay us $20, we'll teach you how to chant Hare Krishna, or $25, whatever it was equivalent to in euros. And so Vidura Prabhu was saying, no, this is not Prabhupada's program. Prabhupada gave the Maha Mantra to everybody. But then the devotee said, yes, but we include a bead bag and japa beads too. But he's saying, well, but that's not that's not the point. You know, Prabhupada gave the Maha Mantra freely. And I was going to suggest, then you could say, well, if you'd like to give a donation, it helps us to cover the bead bag and the beads. But I guess his concern was that there was a precedent that was being set, which was kind of like business-like. You give us $20, we'll teach you how to chant Hare Krishna. I was wondering if that's an example of what you think of what's being compromised.
That's not the only temple that did that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unfortunately.
What are your thoughts, Rupananda?
Well, my opinion is that devotional service has to evolve spontaneously. I mean, I wouldn't even start. Excuse me, I wouldn't even start off giving anybody a bead bag of beads. I'd wait for them to ask for it.
Huh?
I think that's the difference. Otherwise, it's like more sentiment than understanding. More form than substance. I think the real substance comes out when the person has a realization, understanding that they want to do what the book says. They want to do what others are doing. They want to get some beads too, but not to start off. I mean, it's not a formality like that. It's more spontaneous, in my humble opinion. And I think person who comes to that in that more of a spontaneous way is more will remain more fixed. It's not a ritual, you see. Srila Prabhupada said, we don't have rituals in this movement. We don't have any rituals. Everything we do has meaning. So if a person has some understanding what it means to chant, then they'll want to have beads. If they understand it's important to keep the beads clean, they'll want a bead back. You see? So in other words, and they can ask questions along the way and get the right answers. That to me is how you make devotees. You let them blossom, you let them bloom, and you water it. You don't give them all the paraphernalia to start with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying if they ask for it, that's different.
You whet their appetite, get them. Uh-huh.
I mean,
Prabhupada's books do that. I remember,
Yes,
I'm reading the first canto again, and I remember the very, very first time I was reading the first canto, and Prabhupada would talk about and explain the Brahminical qualities and how we develop these qualities, and the discipline we must engage in, the renunciation, the austerities. And it was like automatic, something that I desired, like, okay, I'm in, I want to do this. I want to try, I want to achieve this. And in at least intellectually in my mind, I could see myself dedicating myself to this type of yoga, to this type of discipline. But Prabhupada's there that, his books push us to make more and more commitment. They push us, they bring us, they attract us, and we surrender more and more until we come to that point where, okay, I want to be.
I've made this point many times. Srila Prabhupada is as much in his books and his lectures as he was in that storefront. Absolutely. I can assure you, because I know both. Okay. I grew up with both. So I can't, you can't say, well, you were in the store. I can say I was in the store. And so I'm telling you, reading the Bhagavatam then and reading the Bhagavatam now is the same. Even more powerful now, because Srila Prabhupada put everything into his books.
Yeah.
The Vapu is gone for good. The Vani power that Srila Prabhupada showed to us is all in his books now, and it's all in his lectures.
Mhm.
And the same response you were talking about, spontaneous feelings, understanding will come from studying Srila Prabhupada's books and associating with him in his lectures.
Mhm.
Now, that's how the real Hare Krishna movement goes on. See, that's not ritual. That's substance.
Mhm.
That's substance. There's no substitute for that. And that's the way, in my humble opinion, the movement should still be presented. You see, otherwise it becomes a formality, and the faith is weak. I don't know how to explain it. I think the first thing that new people have to understand is you should listen to Srila Prabhupada. You should listen to Srila Prabhupada. You should associate with him directly, and you should read his books. And then, if you have more, read this chapter. You have any questions? Come on, we'll talk. Get them up in the. It's like if you say to a person, suppose you say to somebody, if somebody asked you, "What's the highest truth you know?" What would you say? Well, that means you got them up on the intellectual platform right away, and the intelligence is the next door neighbor of the soul.
Mhm.
So when you're reading Srila Prabhupada's books, you're up there.
Oh,
So you should encourage people to get up there right off the bat.
Mhm.
Like I just pulled that trick, you see, but the books do that.
I've said to devotees that when I'm reading the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada's books, and you really, like you said, listening, because reading is listening. Like this is Prabhupada speaking to us, that you literally feel that he's like on a Vyasa-san in front of you speaking.
Yes,
It's like right there. It's right there. It's
happening. It's actually happening.
Happening.
It's called submissive oral reception. Call it submissive oral reception.
Yeah.
You see, that's oral meaning the ear. Submit AUR. It means so that magic is still there, but it's not emphasized.
Yeah, it's part of our yoga system. Reading is part of the entire process of yoga, bhakti yoga. It's
Svadhyaya. It's called Svadhyaya. Svadhyaya. Study. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, it's
yeah.
Shruti. Originally, everything was sound. And Srila Prabhupada calls his books recorded sound. So it's still Shruti, you see.
We've had the Rasangis had her hand up for a long time, and so is Nanda Patni after her. So are you there?
Bhagavindu wanted to say something. You've gone on to a different subject, but he had something to say about the bead bag issue.
Oh, Raghavendu, Hari Krishna Prabhu, thank you for coming. This is our godbrother Rupanuga Prabhu. This is our godbrother Raghavendu Prabhu, husband of Rasangi on the West Coast out there in California.
What about the bead bag?
Oh, when I joined in Boston in May of 71, and some few months later, actually very quickly, maybe in June, before Prabhupada came in July, Prabhupada wrote a letter to Satsvarup wrote a letter to Prabhupada telling him how people were coming and they were giving them beads and they were chanting. Prabhupada wrote him a letter back saying that no one can give anyone beads unless it's the duty of the spiritual master to give the beads. He said, but you have a store, a temple store, they can purchase this at a reasonable price. They can purchase the beads and a bead bag in the store if they want to chant.
But you don't give it to them.
You can't give it to them, right? Not to give it to them.
So, Prabhu, excuse me, are you saying that as we're preaching, we shouldn't give beads to others to chant the Maha Mantra together?
No, but you can sell them the beads. You give for a donation. You can say, we have these beads and only the spiritual master can give the beads.
Well, in some places,
ask a small donation.
They have beads there. Everybody takes a set of beads, they chant a round of japa together, and afterwards they collect all the beads again.
Right. Yeah, that's against what Prabhupada said completely. That's the kind of stuff they were doing. Yeah, that's what we were doing. Stuff like that.
No, that's not
Don't do that.
No.
I mean, it's a famous letter.
But you're missing the point. The point was they're not ready to receive that kind of offering. You see, when you show a person how to chant on the beads, like I used to do that in the temple in Henry Street. I used to pass out beads to anybody who would come up to the second floor to attend a japa session. We'd all chant around together on the beads. They wouldn't take them home, but it was just to get people to chant the holy name and get them an idea of how it's a process, a yoga process. Bhakti yoga is a process that involves chanting on beads. See, I wasn't giving it to them.
Right, but that's what we were doing. That's what we were doing. And Prabhupada told them to stop. And to only the spiritual master can give the beads, but you can purchase the beads. And if they're really broke, you can say, well, give me 50 cents if that's all you have.
Okay, look, I have to disagree with you.
Did
He was talking-
Prabhupada actually understand?
Hold on 1 second, Dinesh, finish, Rupanuga Prabhu. Sorry.
I'm saying that you're overestimating. I mean, is a problem, a general statement, a specific statement. Certainly Srila Prabhupada wouldn't object to showing someone how to chant on beads if they're interested. They wouldn't participate if they weren't interested. But you're not giving the beads as a process of acknowledging their faith.
You're not initiating them. You're just teaching them how to chant.
Yeah.
Anyway, because we had to chant for how many, 6 months or a year before we got initiated.
That's
So how did
right.
I get my beads?
Well, you probably bought them at the temple store.
I got it. No, there's no temple store. I joined in DC.
There was no
There was
temple
no
store?
temple store, but I had beads and I chanted, and then I got initiated in LA. We were required to chant at that time for a certain amount of months, right?
Yeah.
Before we got formal initiation.
Yeah.
Just initiate us right away.
It was 6 months, then it was a year.
6 months.
Then it was a year.
So that's a good question. Anyway,
I'm just curious if Prabhupada understood what was going on. If he thought that beads were given as as one does during an initiation, that would be another thing.
No, I remember because when I joined it, they gave me beads also. They just gave me a bead bag and beads and said, "Here, chant Hare Krishna, 16 rounds." And that Sadhguru told. You can see the same thing in the same tradition in the Gaudiya Math. You see the same thing. Like there was in 1981, some of the disciples of the original 11 gurus went to see Srila Sridhar Maharaj against the wishes of the GBC, and they wanted to be. They told him they had no faith in their gurus in ISKCON, and they wanted to be initiated by him, right? So he agreed, and they had to surrender their beads, and they couldn't chant japa for I think it was 3 weeks, and they could only chant kirtan, and then after 3 weeks he initiated them.
After 3 weeks. Look, you open a Pandora's box with that. Because look,
I can tell you another story from
listen to this.
Another godbrother.
Listen to this.
German godbrother. In Walter Eidlitz, remember this? What was that?
Sadananda?
Yeah, Sadananda and Walter Eidlitz. What did Walter Eidlitz's name become? You remember in that book? He was preaching to him for 2 years, and Walter Eidlitz was really wishy-washy. He'd be into it 1 minute, the next minute he'd be full of doubts because he had gone to India to hear from Mayavadis, basically, right? And impersonalists. So finally, he preached to him one last time. They had moved concentration camps, and they were on a train, like a prisoner train that the British had, and taking him to another, what they call concentration camp. And he suddenly realized that everything that Sadananda Swami was telling him was true, right? And he told him, I surrender. I understand now that you are preaching the absolute truth. And I surrender. And so then he said, okay. Then he bowed his head, then he gave him the beads and said, now you should chant this mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But he chanted with him in kirtan. They had little kirtans together, but he never gave him beads until.
wow.
So let's go back to Henry Street.
That's extreme. That's extreme. That's an extreme.
My motive in Henry Street was to get them to chant Hare Krishna. That's all. It wasn't to sell beads to them. I
Right.
collected the beads. It was just to get them to understand. And what I told them when they're half finished, when I was getting a little tired, I could tell. I said that Srila Prabhupada said that anyone who could chant one round on the beads was surpassing the level of the Upanishads.
Wow.
Well, I bet a lot of those devotees joined, a lot of those people joined, huh?
Well, Dravida Maharaj learned how to chant that day.
Wow.
That's what he told me later. I'm not taking credit for anything. I'm just trying to explain. You know, we have to be careful about how we interpret some of the writings Srila Prabhupada gives. I don't mean to argue, but I think anything we could do to get somebody to chant the holy name, and besides this is an important point. The Gaudiya Mat does not emphasize Harinam initiation as important compared to Gayatri. They say you should give it easy for encouragement or something like that. However, it's the movement of the holy name. It's actually the Yuga Dharma. So it is very important.
Well, Srila Sridhar Maharaj said that it was the Gayatri mantra is there to enhance Harinam.
Well, I'm just telling you what we heard in those days.
Only.
So, and what I've heard since. So actually, let me give you another example. On the 10 offenses that Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture in 1970 in LA, he explained as an example, what it meant to preach to the faithless. So I was always thinking up to then it was things like intoxicated person or somebody, inebriated in some way. He explained this. He says, if a spiritual master initiates a person without determining their faith, he is an offender to that.
Without what? I'm sorry.
If a spiritual master initiates someone without determining his faith, he is an offender because that person will go away. Now, what was Srila Prabhupada's criteria? His was 6 months chanting 16 rounds a day and follow the regulative principles to prove your faith. That was his measure. That's why he had us do that. Nobody else does that. And that's the way you determine faith in the holy name, which is the Yuga Dharma, which is intended for this age. It's a very, very big thing. And Lord Chaitanya was the Yuga avatar in addition to everything else. So getting the Harinam initiation is extremely important. And Srila Prabhupada wanted to make sure that a person had enough faith before he got initiated. And he criticized those who didn't do that as being offenders.
Well, I remember that.
So then, it's a kind of a stretch on a statement like accusing Gaudiya Math not to emphasize Harinam, because if you study recently, about 3 days ago, was a celebration of the disappearance day of Bhakti Bodhayan Swami Maharaj's grandfather, who only took Harinam initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta, and he was towards the end, and he was pressured by some of these God brothers to take Diksha, or second initiation, as we call it, from any of the disciples. And he said, no, Harinam is the most important thing, mantra. And if I was qualified to receive Diksha, which actually Bhaktisiddhanta apparently, according to others, he was ready, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati departed. He said he would have given it to me. So this is enough. This is enough for me. I'm convinced all the rest of the world is not to bother him. In the case of Bhatrini, is witness to.
Okay.
You can talk about.
I was Prabhupada's sister's servant, and she received Harinam from Bhaktisiddhanta Srila Prabhupada, Saraswati Prabhupada. And after some time, he said to her, "Why aren't you taking Diksha from me?" And she said, "Oh, my husband, he's not so advanced. He smokes beedies." And her husband didn't have Harinam. And he said, "Oh, you should become so pure that your husband becomes pure. Then I will give you Diksha." So he left the planet, and 3 days later, her husband died. So she did take Diksha later on from Bhakti Saranga at Srila Prabhupada's direction. But when she was being interviewed right after Srila Prabhupada left the planet, they said, do you consider your your brother to be your spiritual master in any way? And she said, no, Saraswati Thakur only. So to her, Harinam was the initiation. And when Govinda Maharaj, it's not, Gaudiya math is just kind of a catch-all maybe for all the groups that are from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Which Prabhupada helped fund some of them.
And Prabhupada was one of the founders of the Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math. My son Vrindavan received Harinam from Srila Prabhupada in October 77. And then later on, Satsvarup gave him Diksha, and he told him, I'm not really your guru, I'm doing this on behalf of Prabhupada. Then later on, he told my son in a letter that he wasn't a guru and he should take Diksha from someone else. So in 98, he took Diksha from Govinda Maharaj, who was the Acharya after Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj left. And Govinda Maharaj told him the same thing. He said, you are a disciple of Srila Prabhupada's, and I'm just giving you these Gayatri mantras and this Diksha on his behalf.
Well, Srila Prabhupada called the first initiation Diksha. Okay. He called it Diksha. He called the first initiation Diksha. Okay. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm telling you, while Srila Prabhupada was here and while I was in the GBC the whole time.
Maybe I made a mistake saying the word Diksha. She said that he asked her why she wasn't taking second initiation. And over the years, many, I don't know what they called it because I wasn't there. But over the years, many people have called getting your Gayatri mantras Diksha.
Well, that's incorrect.
So, and that
incorrect. It's incorrect. It was second initiation. First initiation was called Diksha. After at least 1 year of faithful chanting, Srila Prabhupada would recognize a person as eligible for second initiation, which would allow deity worship and other things. But that was secondary. It was a reward.
What did he call the second initiation?
He just called it Gayatri.
Right.
Yeah.
We called it Gayatri initiation. That's all. And Srila Prabhupada said that was a recognition of the faithfulness that one had performed after receiving Diksha. He called it first initiation was Diksha, and to us was the most important. And it's called, the whole movement is called Harinam.
Didn't
but
Srila
nevertheless,
Prabhupada
I mean,
say,
it was kind of important. I'm sorry.
first initiation, the spirit, you accept the spiritual master. Second initiation means the spiritual master accepts you.
Accepts you.
Anyone remember that?
Where's that from?
Well, that's not how I felt.
It's from a letter. In the
I didn't
folio.
feel that way. I felt accepted from the beginning.
Yeah, me too.
Well, there's the thing about getting, where are these things coming from?
Prabhupada said it. I mean, you
Where
can
are
look it up.
these
It's in the
things-
folio. It's a very famous letter.
Look,
Please
Famous.
find it. Find it.
Nevertheless, it was very exciting to get
Find it
second
now.
initiation in person. That's for sure.
Yeah, a lot of it's
And allow us to.
a lot of it is semantics in a way, right? And everybody has their own
Yeah.
experience, obviously.
We have to go by
Somebody may have been
I'm-
directly initiated by Prabhupada face to face.
well, we have to
And
go
had
by.
it was an amazing experience. And then they ended up for some reason getting second initiation in the mail. Right. So to them, they'll always remember sitting in front
You know
of
what?
Prabhupada.
I think we should have another criteria for facts. Srila Prabhupada formed a GBC for a purpose. The purpose was to pass on and to manage the movement. So we, while he was here at least, did a good job about that because we helped him spread the movement around the world. And we thought exactly what I'm saying. The first initiation was Diksha. The second initiation was called Gayatri. And you took it by listening to a tape in your ear. If you weren't present with Srila Prabhupada, you listened to a cassette player and you would get the second initiation through sound. The Gayatri entered your ear from a cassette player. Okay, that was it. Very simple. But but again, and that was the general instruction for everybody, that first initiation was Diksha. Okay. Second initiation was never called Diksha. It was called Gayatri. Simple. And the emphasis was, first of all, on the first initiation, because one had to prove their faith by doing it for 6 months. And 6 months, a long time in a conditioned soul's life.
There's a very important verse. I can't remember it, but it says, talks about Harinam, and it says, glories of Harinam. It says no Diksha, like not Diksha, but it says no Diksha. Anybody know that shloka? Meaning that for Harinam, ultimately, Diksha is not required.
Well, there's all.
As the glories of Harinam. That's the glories. It might be by.
What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Are we talking about the history or something you?
Oh, it's a verse. Prabhupada quoted that verse. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and you know it says that well, what's the point? Yeah, Diksha is not ultimately. Diksha is not required for the holy name to manifest, but it helps some people, right? It helps.
What do you mean by Diksha now? You mean Gayatri?
What? Yeah.
In the
Diksha, like that, it's not required, and you know, it's not even ultimately. I mean, if somebody really, Prabhupada said about Harinam initiation, he said that if somebody reads my books and has faith, they're already initiated, right? Isn't that a famous quote?
Yeah, anyone who reads my books initiated. That's because someone's saying to him, "What about people who don't get initiated? How are they going to go back to Godhead?"
Right.
Prabhupada said, "Anybody who reads my books is initiated." It didn't mean. Look, let's put things in proper perspective, okay? All I'm telling you is what I heard from Srila Prabhupada for 7 years as his GBC man. He called us his personal representatives. What they did later, I can't say about that. But all I know is that the first initiation was extremely important. It was the proof of faith. It was called Diksha initiation, and second initiation was Gayatri. I think to argue over that point is useless.
Yeah.
Silly.
Nanda Patni's hand up for a long time. And Dinesh
saying it doesn't mean no Diksha in that sense means it's not required to have the Gayatri mantras. Ultimately.
Oh,
everything
that's
from
another
the
thing.
holy name. You get everything from the holy name.
That's another thing.
That's
He
what the
said,
verse
anyone
says.
who falls down, he wrote me this in a letter, okay? Anyone who falls down after first initiation should not be given second.
Right. But then we found out about that letter and we waited to after we got second to fall down.
Even
Okay.
third.
Okay, I was going to go backtrack a little bit, if I may.
Then after you, that is Daneshwar. He's got his hand up. Okay, please continue.
Okay, so there was this comment earlier about this phenomenon of people charging some money for the Maha Mantra. Okay, and we kind of addressed that subject. So what I wanted to ask, sort of a little bit related to that, when we have now fast forwarded in the movement, we see that unlike the early days, people receive salaries for doing devotional service. My understanding is that even pujaris receive salaries. And also I noticed that people sell courses, they sell the Bhakti Shastri. So I just wondered if you could make some comment on that, because you were addressing this kind of depth, if you will, of the spontaneity of devotional service.
Yes.
Thank you.
I read a quote from Srila Prabhupada the last time we met, in which Srila Prabhupada said, this was a purport in Bhagavatam. He said, receiving payment, receiving salary, he's talking about this kind of general, receiving salary is not good, because one will serve the money and not the cause.
Yes, that's right. It's in a purport, isn't
So
it?
we never, there were no salaries in those days. In fact, the GBC didn't have it. We had a secretary and we had a chairman. We didn't have a treasurer because we didn't have a treasurer. There was no treasurer. So this whole idea of turning the movement into a means of livelihood
Yes.
has been a disaster. You can't pay a person for devotional service. It will not elicit devotional service.
Thank you.
So Shilpa made that clear. You're serving the money and not the cause.
Right. Thank you so much for.
At Bhaktivedanta Manor, 80 devotees are paid for helping to put on marriages. How would you classify that? It's
the whole thing has been gradually metamorphosed into an organized religion where rituals are presented as bhakti. Bhakti is voluntary. Bhakti cannot be purchased. Bhakti cannot be paid for. It is the spirit soul's unfolding of his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so much ritualistic that mostly to accommodate the Indian people, because Indian devotees come from a long culture, tradition of so many rituals, so many festivals. So a lot of influences come from many Indians joining the movement, brought with them many of these things which Srila Prabhupada didn't employ when he was here, like blessing cars, giving blessings to a car. I mean, at Potomac Temple, they call it's New Hastinapur is the real name. They bless cars. I was thinking when I heard that, when are you going to bless the washing machine? What's next? There's a ceremony. There's a ceremony where they do it, and it's for money.
It brings in a few bucks to support the temple. That's the bottom line, right? Puja.
That's the rationalization.
Right.
But it's business. It's business.
We have Daneshvar, Jivan Mukta, and then the Zoom user, which I'm assuming is Bhavatrini, in that order. Daneshvar Prabhu, Jivan Mukta, and then Bhavatrini Nurhari. Daneshvar Prabhu?
Yeah. Much conversation is going on since I put my hand up. Hard to remember everything. But there's one temple in Croatia where they will not allow anybody to do anything without paying them. They insist on paying them. And so, in other words, there's no devotional service, right? You can't do anything without getting paid. It beggars the imagination.
This is Kuwait, you said?
And what was
you said Kuwait?
Croatia.
Croatia. Okay.
Croatia.
So if you need some service from the temple, they say X amount of dollars.
If you go there, you want to make flower garlands, they're going to end up paying you some money.
Oh, everyone's on salary, in other words.
Not a salary, but they get paid somehow or other. I'm not sure how it works.
X amount of dollars.
The other thing I was going to mention, it was many, many years ago, maybe around 2009, 10, 11, 12, something like that. There was a lot of discussion about wages for sages. And so it was being discussed at that time, how should we handle things? Because what was going on was there was not enough of these living in the temple anymore to carry out all of the temple activities that were thought to be important. And so because we require money to live in this world, the question was, well, if we then pay those devotees who come to do that, then they'll be able to afford to do that and live. So that was a long discussion. I didn't pay attention to all of it at that time, but the final conclusion was apparently that wages for sages is okay. And it was very disappointing to me to learn that because it seemed like, okay, well, what does devotional service mean then? How do you distinguish? Oh yeah. Like the manor. Everybody that goes there and does their service, they get paid for doing that. Okay, then when do they do devotional service? Because that's like their job. So then they want time off and they don't go back to the temple to do things without getting paid. So it's almost like completely undermines their entire devotional service. So I'm
Sages don't
personally,
sages don't get
very
wages.
much against it.
Sages don't
sorry?
get wages. Sages don't get wages.
Yeah, well, that wasn't their conclusion, unfortunately.
I say sages do not get wages. They said wages for
That was
sages.
not their conclusion, unfortunately.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the
I
matter.
want to know an odd thing. A morning walk in '76 was with Prabhupada and all the GBCs, and two of them, devotees, sannyasis, were trying to get the third one in trouble because they said, "Oh, Prabhupada, he's giving your books away for free," and they thought Prabhupada was going to sauce him out. But Prabhupada said, "As long as he pays me, that's okay."
Of course, they're paid for.
He said,
Can I read this
Of
quote?
course, we have, yeah.
This is from a Rune Conversation, 12/12/70 in Indore. When there is a question of payment, the service is not good because the payment means he's serving the money. He's not serving the cause.
Right.
That's it. That's it. And I'll give you another example. When he got a report from Radha Vallabha, who was managing the BBT, and the report said, we have saved $5,000 a month now by releasing some of the staff. And Srila Prabhupada wrote back, you're paying salaries? You're paying salaries? In other words, you can understand that's how you save the money. You weren't paying salaries. He says, we don't pay salaries. He said, the scientists aren't getting salaries. He was talking about BI.
Uh-huh. Well, Prabhupada actually wanted to give them $10,000 a month.
Well, that was not a salary. That was for the managing the group, for the preaching work. That was not for salaries.
Jivan Mukta's had his hand up for a long time.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to make a comment on that initiation discussion, that in January of 1977, Srila Prabhupada actually made it clear that he wanted to start limiting Brahminical initiations, that unless someone was directly engaged in Brahminical work and activity, he no longer wanted just to indiscriminately hand out this second initiation. And not only Brahminical initiation, but he also wanted to stop sannyas initiations.
Exactly.
Unless someone was extremely qualified and obviously qualified, but he didn't want to see all this fall down. But it was important to note that even Brahminical initiation, unless someone was directly engaged in Brahminical work, Prabhupada no longer wanted it just handed out to anyone and everyone.
Yes, he was saying he was concerned that so many people were getting second initiation and were leaving. So they weren't actually fixed. The Varnashram was important because they were giving people were not qualified. Brahmin didn't mean just deity. Brahmin meant preaching.
Yes.
You see, a person who was actually preaching. You see, so
it was already happening in. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying things got more and more strict. He said in the beginning we were lenient, but now we must boil the milk. Now we must become more strict. Exactly. So as the years went by, he became more and more strict. You see, 77, that was close to his departure. He wanted to leave things in good shape. Yeah. He wanted to make things clear how he wanted things to go on. He wanted people to be more serious, to be more dedicated. You see, that's what he wanted to leave a strong movement. That last letter I got from Srila Prabhupada in April 77 made it clear that he wanted to come to America to call all his leaders there so he could strengthen the movement, that it would endure permanently. That was his desire. He has something he wanted to say to tell us how to keep everything strong. He was very concerned that when he would leave, things would go on properly.
So what do you think about then the future initiations? There'll be always need of, like Prabhupada said, Brahman means that he makes Brahmins. He was hopeful to, when he told us, Hanuman, I said, oh, I want all of you to become instructing gurus, all of you to come to that standard. And then as the society, as the time goes on, there'll be men and even that would want to retire and take sannyas. And so in the case of Srila Prabhupada, it was pretty much Bhaktisiddhanta who kept appearing in his dreams to ask him to take sannyas. And he went to Sridhar, who said, I can do this to your family. So his next admired, like he called him Shiksha Gurudev, was Bhakti Pragyan Kesava Maharaj, and he took sannyas from him. But we always thought, as Prabhupada told us that story, that his sannyas truly came from his spiritual master. So how would you then, based on, you were saying, that at that time Prabhupada said, that's enough, now let's boil the milk, which, of course, but, and the matter of initiation, like Jivan Mukta was saying, by 77, but it was already happening in 73 when was recommended. Prabhupada wrote back. Hanuman asked him, Hanuman at that time was Swami, GBC. He asked him, he said, this boy is qualified. Can you give him first and second initiation? Prabhupada wrote back that due to the circumstances of what was going on in the movement, that he wanted me to wait another 6 months for a second initiation. He said, there's too many leaving, I've done this before, and too many they take second initiation and they're gone. So
Can I make a comment on that?
Please.
Okay, this is a statement Srila Prabhupada made in October 76 in Chandigarh during an interview. He says, well, initiation or no initiation. First thing is knowledge. Knowledge. Initiation is formality. Just like you go to school for knowledge, and admission is formality. That is not a very important thing. So Srila Prabhupada was stressing, this is 76. He was stressing knowledge, divijnana. He was stressing jnana and vijnana. He was stressing knowledge is the most important thing. That one takes initiation into a knowledge, into an institution, an educational institution. You see? So the question is, the knowledge has to be passed on. And that means that by reading the Srila Prabhupada's books, one begins to understand the importance of initiation and what it means to have a qualified spiritual master that you can surrender to. You're supposed to sit in front of that person for a year. You're not supposed to choose from a lineup of pre-certified gurus. That obliterates the responsibility of the initiate. So things get loose, things get formalized, and the substance is lost. Everything becomes form. Everything becomes form. A lot of form, a lot of rituals, a lot of rules and regulations, a lot of laws, this kind of laws. But meanwhile, the substance is lost.
Thank you. We have 6 paragraphs left to complete this verse. Jivan Mukta, did you have another point to make, Prabhu? And then Daneshwar, I see your hands are up.
Yeah, we got off the subject.
No, I made the point there, and but I think it's interesting that when Rupanuga Prabhu just mentioned about 1 year being with the guru and examining the gurus and so on. I mean, that could be done through reading Prabhupada's books again, that we examine the guru by reading Prabhupada's books.
Exactly.
He's right there. Like, spend a year examining Srila Prabhupada through his realization, his words, his teachings. It's right there. It's not just something theoretical. Prabhupada is right there in every word of the Bhagavatam.
And therefore, the person who's making initiations on his behalf, in his name, because he's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, he should be a transparent medium for Srila Prabhupada. And that is up to the prospective initiate to determine.
And that also protects the prospective initiate from bogus, preachers, because after getting the real substance, the actual substance, then everything else becomes clear.
Yes, Absolutely. That's why some devotees had to have 1, 2, 3 initiations.
Yeah.
Because the first one was not certain. It wasn't proper. They didn't do it properly, and they weren't initiated properly because their relationship was not clear. See, everyone was actually, in reality, linking everyone to Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya, through his teachings, through his knowledge. And if that came through a person, came through his mouth, the ring of truth, then a person could detect that. If he had been reading Srila Prabhupada's books at all, he'd have already heard something what the ring of truth was. He would have some training. But they don't emphasize read Srila Prabhupada's books for 6 months or before you think about getting initiated. You got to know what you're getting into.
Mhm. Before we
If there was a constitution, then
Yeah.
a copy could be handed out to any prospective member and they could see so much would be described about what's expected of a person who wants to become initiated, what's expected of an initiator, what the qualifications are, what the disciplinary actions are. It's all there, law and order.
But aren't they taking exams now, I think, before initiation? I think they do that now, don't they?
They have a course, a disciple course. Daneshwar Prabhu, do you know anything about that? Isn't there like an oath of allegiance in that initiation course? Do you know, Daneshwar Prabhu?
There's a guru course.
Uh-huh.
There's a GBC course. You can give a course in anything.
Guru course.
But how about a course on loving Srila Prabhupada? How about a course on understanding who Srila Prabhupada is? Huh? How about a course on understanding Srila Prabhupada's mission?
Yes. Yes.
Prairie agrees.
We're supposed to be reading Nectar.
Yeah. That's 6
Nectar of instruction.
We have 6 paragraphs.
I wanted.
But
What verse are you on?
Daneshwar Prabhu's had his. Are you done with your point, Daneshwar?
No, I was trying to speak, but I didn't notice that I was muted.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of requirements for everybody, and unfortunately, it's both of allegiance to the GBC. The GBC have established one person, usually in each yatra, who can grade those papers, the tests for those who are prospective disciples, which gives that person a lot of power. I know several devotees who have complained to me that they know they passed the test based on their understanding of what the questions were, but because they were a little politically outspoken, they were given a failing grade. So those kinds of things are going on, unfortunately. The point I wanted to, I remember the point I wanted to originally make way back when. It was about initiation. And Diksha, we're talking about Diksha. So in Madhya Lila, chapter 15, text 108, there's a statement by Lord Chaitanya that Diksha is not required, or let's say initiation is not required. I'm not sure if the word Diksha is used. Initiation is not required. The holy name alone is powerful enough to deliver one. In the purport, Prabhupada, the first thing he does is quote, I think from Hari Bhakti Vilas, the shloka that explains that Diksha is the process of transference of transcendental knowledge. So he defines Diksha, or let's say Shastra defines Diksha like that. And then for the remainder of the purport, Prabhupada talks about taking initiation, which seems to be a contradiction to the verse. But what Prabhupada is speaking about, actually, if you read it carefully, what's Diksha? The process of transference of transcendental knowledge. So we're saying about the understanding what is Diksha. So this is why Prabhupada was going on and on talking about even though Lord Chaitanya says verse is not necessary. Prabhupada was emphasizing the process of transference of transcendental knowledge.
Yes. And he explained in that same purport, which I'm familiar with, he said that a fully initiated Vaishnava may be an offender to the holy name. So the whole point was to avoid offenses to the holy name. That's what this movement's about. This is the Hare Krishna movement. And the whole point is for us to become pure devotees by chanting without offense. So initiation was a formality to Srila Prabhupada. And those are very interesting verses, which they talk about the strength of the holy name and how it can lead one to liberation. And it's explained that initiation, but he says there also, if one is going to take part in the institution, then he has to follow whatever the plans are, whatever the requirements are for initiation into the institution, into ISKCON. But before, back in '67, he said, it's not that necessary that everyone become a member of society. We want them to take the idea and introduce it in their private life. So there's no way that everyone in the world is going to get initiated, but there's every chance that many, many people will get a chance to get Srila Prabhupada's books. As he said, anyone who reads my books and believes in my books, they're as good as initiated. They are initiated. He told that to Vaikuntanath.
They're initiated. That's the definition.
Bhavatrini, you've had a point. We have 6 paragraphs to finish to complete this text.
Okay.
Just make your point.
I don't really have a point. I wanted to know if we're still on, which verse are we on in the?
Yes, thank you. We're on verse 6. I'd like to commence the reading if that's all right with everybody.
Okay. Can I, before we do the reading, I missed the reading of the verse, and I'm holding this 1986 book, and I wanted to see if it's the same verse.
Okay, so how are you going to do that?
Well,
All right, we talked about that Wednesday.
Yeah, can we read the verse and then I'll read the verse in this one, or vice versa? I made a mistake, though. I read a purport on the one I thought was wrong. So I wanted to, yeah.
Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee's having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. So far, so good?
Yeah.
According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee, but despite such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. It's exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The Ganges water do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. Is that okay?
Exactly.
Great.
So I made a mistake. I was reading a purport. I thought I was reading a verse.
To read, Rasangi.
Yeah, I can read. If I can see it, it's so small.
Okay.
I'm on my phone.
Bigger. Zoom in. How's that? Can you see that?
Not really. Let me turn my phone to the side. All right. Even though.
One more. Yes, good. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Even though a pure devotee may not be born in a Brahmin or Goswami family, if he is engaged in the service of the Lord, he should not be neglected. In actuality, there cannot be a family of Goswamis based on material considerations, caste, or heredity. The Goswami title is actually the monopoly of the pure devotees. Thus we speak of the 6 Goswamis, headed by Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami had practically become Mohammedans and had therefore changed their names to Dabir Kash and Shakar Malik. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself made them Goswamis. Therefore, the Goswami title is not hereditary. The word Goswami refers to one who can control the senses, who is master of the senses. A devotee is not controlled by the senses, but is the controller of the senses. Consequently, he should be called Swami or Goswami, even though he may not be born in a Goswami family.
Bavatrini,
Yeah.
Bavatrini, can you and Hari read a paragraph each, please? Bavatrini,
Yes, we'll read. Okay.
please. Thank you.
Um,
According to this
I'm
formula.
trying to find, where's the,
Formula.
I don't, okay. According to this formula, the Goswamis, who are descendants of Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Advaita Prabhu, are certainly devotees, but devotees coming from other families should not be discriminated against. Indeed, whether the devotees come from a family of previous acharyas or from an ordinary family, they should be treated equally. One should not think, oh, here's an American Goswami, and discriminate against him. Nor should one think, here is a Nityananda Vamsa Goswami. There is an undercurrent of protest against our awarding the title Goswami to the American Vaishnavas of the Krishna consciousness movement. Sometimes people flatly tell the American devotees that their sannyas title or title of Goswami is not bona fide. However, according to the statements of Srila Rupa Goswami in this verse, an American Goswami and a Goswami in the family of acharyas are non-different.
Anything from you, Rupanuga Prabhu, before we go on to the next paragraph?
No.
Okay. Nirhari, can you read the next paragraph?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yeah.
On the other
Right.
hand,
On the other hand, a devotee who has attained the title of Goswami, but is not born of a Brahmin father or of a Goswami in the family of Nityananda or Advaita Prabhu, should not be artificially puffed up by thinking that he has become a Goswami. He should always remember that as soon as he becomes materially puffed up, he immediately falls down. This Krishna consciousness movement is a transcendental science, and there is no room for jealousy. This movement is meant, there's no room for jealousy. This movement is meant for the Paramahamsas who are completely free from all jealousy. Param nirmatsaranam. Nirmatsara means envy. One should not be jealous whether he's born in a family of Goswamis or has the title of Goswami awarded to him. As soon as anyone becomes envious, he falls down from the platform of Paramahamsa.
thank you. Prairie, would you like to read?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. If we consider
In the car. Oh, where is the text?
the bodily.
Sorry. If we consider the bodily defects of a Vaishnav, we should understand that we are committing an offense at the lotus feet of the Vaishnav. An offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnav is very serious. Indeed, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described this offense as Hati Mata, the mad elephant offense. A mad elephant can create a disaster, especially when it enters into a nicely trimmed garden. One should therefore be careful not to commit any offense against a Vaishnav. Every devotee should be ready to take instructions from a superior Vaishnav, and a superior Vaishnav must be ready to help an inferior Vaishnav in all respects. One is superior or inferior according to his spiritual development in Krishna consciousness. One is forbidden to observe the activities of a pure Vaishnav from a material point of view. For the neophyte especially, considering a pure devotee from a material point of view is very injurious. One should therefore avoid observing a pure devotee externally, but should try to see the internal features and understand how he is engaged in the transcendental love service of the Lord. In this way, one can avoid seeing the pure devotee from a material point of view, and thus one can gradually become a purified devotee himself.
Thank you. Anything from you, Rupanuga Prabhu?
No.
Okay. Let's see who hasn't read yet. Rebecca Kaufman, are you able to read? Thank you for coming. I'm not sure if you've come before, but thank you. Are you available? You're on mute right now, just to let you know, in case you didn't know. Rebecca, no, you're not reading? Then how about you, Stoka Krishna Prabhu? Would you like to read? Stoka Krishna, are you there? Or maybe you're working. And Anne, she comes, but she's never read before. So you're welcome to read.
Sorry, Prabhu. I'm
Oh,
just in the middle of a noisy environment, so it's,
that's
but I'm just listening.
okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, all right. If we consider the bodily defects of a Vaishnav, we should understand that we are committing an offense. I don't think we read this yet, did we?
I just
Yes.
read that,
I don't-
Prabhu.
You just read it. Read it.
Yeah.
We're
Oh,
on
okay.
those who think that Krishna consciousness is limited.
Those that think that Krishna consciousness is limited to a certain section of society, a certain section of devotees, or a certain tract of land are generally prone to see the external features of the devotee. Such neophytes, unable to appreciate the exalted service of the advanced devotee, try to bring the Mahabhagavat to their platform. We experience such difficulty in propagating this Krishna consciousness all over the world. Unfortunately, we are surrounded by neophyte godbrothers who do not appreciate the extraordinary activities of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. They simply try to bring us to their platform, and they try to criticize us in every respect. We very much regret their naive activities and poor fund of knowledge. An empowered person who is actually engaged in the confidential service of the Lord should not be treated as an ordinary human being. For it is stated that unless one is empowered by Krishna, one cannot spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. So, Rupanuga Prabhu, do you think Srila Prabhupada is he speaking about his disciples here and how others perceive his disciples? He's talking about himself. How do you understand this paragraph?
He's talking about his God brothers.
Right? Yes. They're not appreciating so
No,
much.
they were disrespectful to him.
Uh-huh.
They were criticizing him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's speaking openly, which he doesn't like to do,
Right.
but he's speaking openly here about the God brothers not cooperating with him. In fact, they were the opposite. And that all came out in my letter from that we've discussed before. They had no heart for preaching, and that's the whole thing. No heart for preaching. There has to be a heart for preaching to be a Vaishnava.
Right.
A Vaishnava is intended to preach.
Later, after Prabhupada cut all the jungles, Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj came to America, Govinda Maharaj came to America, Narayan Maharaj came to America. Several of them came later.
So, what's that mean?
I'm just saying Prabhupada opened the door to facilitate them.
Well, they were invited by Srila Prabhupada's disciples, most of them.
Right.
The refugees from ISKCON were the ones who were preaching in the Gaudiya Math and for Narayan Maharaj's people. They were the inspiration for preaching comes from Srila Prabhupada,
Mm-hmm.
who is the embodiment of the missionary spirit of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the power. He had the power.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj said that, well, who was it that said Prabhupada blasted a wall,
A hole.
a hole in the and then everyone else.
Blasted a hole in the mountain of Western false ego.
And then everyone else came through. But Prabhupada blasted a hole in the mountain of the false ego of the Western world.
I think he just said a mountain. There's the mountain of false ego, is what he said.
And then everyone else came
Uh-huh.
through.
He also mentioned to us in a lecture here in Hawaii, Bhakti Sundar, he said Prabhupada actually paved a fantastic freeway for us now to comfortably come and go. But it's all credits to him.
Right.
Same as Narayana Maharaj, he will give lectures on Prabhupada's books. The Chaitanya Charitamrita was taught from Srila Prabhupada's translations and books. And he always mentioned that was, he is the one that we, as disciples, always come first. And like that.
Anyone who does not acknowledge Srila Prabhupada's books as the law books for the next 9,500 years is disingenuous.
Right.
Oh, when I was at Srila Prabhupada's ceremony after he was
Viraha Mahotsava.
Viraha Mahotsava, Ban Maharaj began speaking, and it sounded like he was criticizing Srila Prabhupada. He said, and then he corrected himself. He said, oh, it's not very important that your Srila Prabhupada made so many disciples in the West and got people in the West to become Krishna conscious because he preached to the hippies. I myself would not have preached to the hippies, but his books, they are invaluable. I don't remember the words, but he did a turnaround, and then he extolled the books, and he also spoke how they would be the books for the next 10,000 years.
Nice. Rupanuga Prabhu, would you like to read the last paragraph and make any comments on that, please? This is the last paragraph of the verse.
When one thus criticizes a pure devotee, he commits an offense, Vaishnava aparad. That is very
correct.
That is very obstructive and dangerous for those who desire to advance in Krishna consciousness. A person cannot derive any spiritual benefit when he offends the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. Everyone should therefore be very careful not to be jealous of an empowered Vaishnava or a Shuddha Vaishnava. It is also an offense to consider an empowered Vaishnava an object of disciplinary action. It is offensive to try to give him advice or to correct him. One can distinguish between a neophyte Vaishnava and an advanced Vaishnava by their activities. The advanced Vaishnava is always situated as a spiritual master, and the neophyte is always considered his disciple. The spiritual master must not be subjected to the advice of a disciple, nor should a spiritual master be obliged to take instructions from those who are not his disciples. This is the sum and substance of Srila Rupa Goswami's advice in the 6th verse.
What are your reflections on this paragraph, Rupanuga Prabhu?
Those who did offend Srila Prabhupada didn't make any spiritual advancement, or they went backwards. Because an offense to Srila Prabhupada was very grievous. Very grievous offense. Because he's the one, and his disciples are the ones who printed his books. His disciples are the ones who helped him publish the books and distribute the books. So he's also speaking on their behalf. He didn't like it when his disciples were being criticized. Remember one time I was in Srila Prabhupada's room in LA, and some Indians were there, Indian students, and they saw my red beads. One of them sitting next to me said, "Oh, you have to get the proper beads. You have to get the right beads." And then someone next to him said, "Those are his initiation beads." And he shut up. He didn't like my beads. He said I should get the right kind of beads.
Those are the beads that Prabhupada chanted on, right?
That's right. That's right. So these things, these formalities, these rituals, these things I just read, these are not important. Srila Prabhupada said the real important thing is the knowledge. And what the problem is, the knowledge has to be passed on as it is. It can't be changed. The voice, Srila Prabhupada's voice cannot be changed. You see, that's the real point. It's the knowledge that is the movement.
I'm really happy this book is right on.
Please mute.
And look, it was from India.
What?
No, Bhavatrini started speaking in the middle of yours speaking. I'm sorry, Rupanuga.
I didn't, I'm finished.
No, sorry, we
I
didn't have the
didn't,
the
I
mic
didn't,
off.
I
So,
didn't mean to.
Hari and Bhavatrini, you had your hand raised. Did you want to share a point or
I
Yeah,
know
I
I-
wanted to say something.
Yeah, Nuri wanted to say something, but I accidentally was just so excited
Okay,
that
don't worry
book
about
from 86 isn't edited that I said, oh, I'm so happy. I wasn't trying to say anything. Our mic was on, sorry. I was just happy the book wasn't changed.
I wanted to, I don't know if anybody's there.
So what happened?
I don't know.
You're there.
It's frozen.
Ah,
No, you're not frozen. Can
You're
you
not.
hear?
Oh, okay. Right.
We
Yeah, I
can
can hear you now.
We can hear
Okay.
you.
Oh, all right.
Go ahead, Prabhu.
Yes. I just thought that for a point of clarification, when, for people here, because I encounter both. I encounter people who are very fanatic about you should only read Prabhupada's books, but in Prabhupada's books, he's encouraging us. For example, you just read about Dhaneshwar Prabhu was reading about Hari Bhakti Vilas, and when I was in Vrindavan, studying puja, I was the pujari for Krishna Balaram and Lalita and Vishaka. And so we had the head pujari translating Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is a very important book, actually. It resolves all that we've been talking about, initiation, who's qualified or not. That's a teacher, but also the qualifications of disciples, who they said about this age are the most difficult to find a good disciple. But so I wanted some clarification from you, Prabhu, or what's your understanding, because in many of the purpose, Prabhupada encourages us to, like for example, in Radimna Swami was reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and some of his books, not all of them have been translated. And in that lecture, he talks about a purport in the sixth canto, I believe, where Prabhupada is encouraging the follower, the sadhaka, to read, because it will enhance, it deepens, to read, for example, the pastimes of Lord Krishna, the pastimes of Raja,
Okay,
of Vrindavan. And
we're
so
running out of time. We're running out of time. Can I take a second to answer that?
yeah.
Okay. Actually, that's a whole subject matter, but there's something we can say. The problem is this, as I explained before in a previous video, about jumping over to the previous acharya. The problem with that is this: the understanding. Krishna explains, I consent to reveal myself in proportion to the service rendered to my pure devotee. The problem here is that there's no way to serve those previous acharyas. And that's the relationship. That's why we can't jump over Srila Prabhupada. So the question is, can we understand what they've written? First of all, it was not written in English or French, or anything. It was all written in Sanskrit or Bengali. First question is, who translated? Srila Prabhupada said, anything translated by the Gaudiya Math after 1936 is not accepted.
There's a devotee named Hari Prasad. He's a Sanskrit scholar, I believe. Nirhari Prabhu, is that? I believe it's Hari Prasad. It's
Parsad.
Parsad. Yeah. He's one.
Parsad, yes.
Okay, let me explain. When he was asked this question on May 28 at the last GBC meeting, one of the things we discussed was the BBT. One question he was asked, Srila Prabhupada, can we publish books translated from other acharyas, previous acharyas? His answer was, a person has to be is exceptional. It must be very realized to do that. And I don't think we have anyone that can do that. So it was very important that we understand what Srila Prabhupada was saying. It's a question of purity. We have to know something about, and besides that, I'm not saying only read Srila Prabhupada's books, but I just have to remind everybody that everything we need is in those books. And also he included in his purports and lectures many quotes in Vishwanath Thakur from Jiva Goswami Prabhupada. He was giving us what he considered to be their essential contribution. I mean, that's why he did Nectar of Instruction. That's why he did Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He wanted to give us Rupa Goswami's essential teachings. So we don't lose anything. He'll give us whatever we need. But the controversies are there as soon as we start going to the previous acharyas, because there's an element missing here and jumping over Srila Prabhupada. And that is the top, that is what Krishna wanted, the service to that pure devotee. And that's why he would consent to reveal himself in proportion to that service. So my question is, how do we serve those great devotees? How do we serve them? And how do we have a relationship with them that we can understand their teachings? That's why Srila Prabhupada said, you may read some books, but you cannot understand my Guru Maharaj except through me. And he said about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the same thing. There's no need to go for outside instruction whatsoever. And I already read these quotes in the previous video. We have to keep going over these things because they're very important.
Yeah, so the point there too.
Listen. The most important thing for this movement, the Hare Krishna movement, the Srila Prabhupada brought to America, was to be a transparent medium for him, the founder Acharya. That's the essence, to be a transparent medium. And anyone who does that is his bona fide disciple. But that's the essence.
I totally agree. I'm not in contradiction to that. My question was that why did Prabhupada encourage, even in the song, Rupa Raghunatha Pade, I will follow from Rupa to, that means all Prabhupada says in that, the purport of that song, Narottam Das Thakur's song, that Rupa Raghunatha means we'll follow all the 6 Goswamis. How do we serve them? By reading their scriptures.
We're serving them through him.
Yeah.
Through
right.
him, through his translation. We cannot approach it. We cannot approach them directly. We cannot.
No, nobody's saying that. In the song Prabhupada writes, the purport of that song is that first is the spiritual master. Through him to the 6 Goswamis, through them to Nitai Gauranga, Panchatattva, and then through them we'll be able to really understand.
Srila Prabhupada had a list of books he wanted to translate. He was planning on translating Jaiva Dharma, for example. There was a list. He didn't get to it.
Yeah.
He didn't get to
That's
it.
such an important book.
Therefore, we have to be very careful about reading the books that he didn't get to. By whose translation, just like I have a copy of Jaiva Dharma that someone gave me. It doesn't tell me who translated it, when it was translated, anything. But yet there's one so-called section there everybody quotes that says, this proves we didn't come from the spiritual world. This proves we never fell. And they're quoting that, but that same Bengali can be translated in another way, which doesn't mean that.
Well, I mean, we had God brothers like Gaur Govinda Maharaj who totally wrote about that too, and who agreed. And Prabhupada considered him advanced enough to make him, he said, you can initiate disciples. In the case of Narayan Maharaj, Prabhupada asked us to go and take advice from him. And he said pretty much the same thing.
Listen,
the same thing as you say. The same thing as you say, the purity of the person who translates.
Listen, Gaur Govinda Maharaj said, you cannot get Divya Gyan from a tape recorder. You cannot get Divya Gyan from a recording. He said it. I heard him say it. That puts a thorn in our side because our whole movement is based on Srila Prabhupada's books and getting Divya Gyan from reading them or hearing his lectures as Divya Gyan personified. How can we say?
Then you said that Prabhupada was mistaken in considering him advanced enough to give him 3 initiations.
Stop that.
But I'm not.
I'm telling you what I heard, and I'm telling you I don't care about his initiation or anything else. This is the only thing I know. is I read it
We
in a
can't get it
written
from a tape.
translation. He said that, and that was a great disservice to say that, because our whole movement is based on Srila Prabhupada Bani. To say that you
Yes,
can't
he
get
told.
that, just to say that you have to get that from a person and not from a book is incorrect.
You're not the first person I've heard take issue with.
What you said.
But what
I've-
does it have to do with what I said? I was just asking.
What you say
I
is
was
not
saying,
important. What you said is not important compared to what I'm discussing about the book themselves and what he
Yeah,
said.
no, I'm an insignificant worm and stool. That's no problem about that. I'm just trying to remember things and clarify them correctly. You're talking about books of law to be followed forever.
No,
And in
what I'm
those books,
talking about,
Prabhupada is
listen,
encouraging us to serve the six Goswamis or to
what I'm
read,
talking, what
to
I'm talking
enhance
about.
understanding. The
What I-
other thing
listen.
is that the other things that I wanted to say
Well,
was
stop talking for a minute.
Let him respond, Prabhu, please.
The whole point about being a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, I don't care who it is to be a transparent medium for him and not somebody else. Or put your own words instead of Srila Prabhupada's. That's how we have to judge who is speaking correctly and who isn't. The standard is there in Srila Prabhupada. Personally, what he spoke, what he wrote. Anything that contradicts that is wrong. We follow our spiritual master first. No one else is equal to him or can ever be equal to him. No one else can possibly replicate what Srila Prabhupada did to preach the Chinta Beta Beta Tattva all over the
No,
planet.
that's not in question, Prabhu. That's not in question. Right here, that's not in question. That's not my question. And then Prabhupada also talked about going to Sridhar Maharaj to take advice, spiritual advice.
Listen,
He
please
told
let-
me personally, and Hanuman, he said, when Hanuman asked him, well, Prabhupada, when you're gone, who am I going to get advice from? So there are certain things that are not totally clear. And one point I see in the lecture where Prabhupada talks, we falling from the spiritual sky. That's in Australia, like 1970 or so. It's there on videotape, you can see it. Then I saw another video where Prabhupada definitely is talking Jaiva Dharma, talking that we are Tatashta, we're marginal. You know,
Well,
hey,
listen, Gaura,
So-
it's not fair to bring this subject matter up at this time because there's not enough time. There's not enough time to
You
discuss
were
it.
bringing it
But
up.
you were bringing it up, Prabhu. So that's all I'm just saying is I'm going back to where you mentioned in the purpose that we're reading, the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So in that book, yes, it's very important that the translator will be of utmost purity and advancement. And that was reiterated by one of the persons that Prabhupada asked us to go to as guidance, Narayan Maharaj. Was saying,
Can I
no,
tell you what he
yeah,
told?
the translation.
Can I tell you what he told the GBC, or are you interested or not? He told us
Yeah,
we're not to take instructions about managing a spiritual movement from his godbrothers. He said that. He said if you had some philosophical question, you could go to Sridhar. But he said very clearly that we are not to take instructions about managing the movement from his godbrothers.
yeah, and I didn't bring management, nothing to do with management. And Narayan Maharaj didn't want to manage the society. It's not about management. It's about spiritual guidance and understanding these
He
points,
never
very
listen,
fine points of philosophy.
listen. He never asked us to go to Narayan Maharaj for spiritual guidance. He picked Narayan Maharaj to set up the whole Samadhi ceremony because he knew how to do it. He was using.
No, he wasn't a
Narayan-
liar. Oh, it's just like that. No importance. But he's a Vaishnava, a dedicated sannyas, never fell down. He followed his spiritual master, whom Prabhupada considered him his guide. He gave him sannyas. The Pragyan Kesava Maharaj gave him sannyas. He lived with them. And so why lump everybody with it? Prabhupada spoke, like you said, about his godbrothers. Don't go ask him guidance on how to run the society. That's not what I was saying.
And
I was agreeing with you on that.
Narayan Maharaj is not a god brother anyway.
Right, that's what I was saying too.
Hello?
And he was a Ritvik for Prabhupada's ceremony. But he wasn't just a priest that you can call. He could have called anybody else or tell Tamar Krishna with his supreme intelligence to go read whatever is necessary to put him in samadhi. And then, then there's witnesses where he did say, go to Narayan Maharaj. But I mean, to me personally, he said, go to someone at Vaishnava that your heart tells you to. You don't talk about institution, you talk about Vaishnava.
It's almost 10 o'clock here in eastern side of North America.
Oh no, you should go to sleep. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. Daneshwar, did you have a point to make before we go, or are you done? Rupanuga Prabhu, or did you have any other points to make? Anything from your side, Rupanuga Prabhu?
I'm willing to discuss this at length, but not in this forum.
And in which way is acceptable to you? Probably at an earlier time.
I don't think that this is something to discuss because no positions will not change. They've been like this for a long time, decades.
Mhm.
These positions are not going to change. What I would have to say would be considered what my insights into what my knowledge that I got from Srila Prabhupada and what I did by observing would be considered offensive. So I don't really want to go on with it.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I think we can all agree to honor one another's perspectives. Thank you very much. Let's see who's got. Okay, you're okay. I think you're done now, right, Baba? You've got your hand up still. I think, Baba.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Put my hand down.
I'm very grateful we could get through chapter text 6.
Yes.
Sri Upadeshamrita. And we'll either continue with Krishna book or maybe read some Ramayan because I think Lord Ramachandra's appearance is on the 10th. Is that correct? I think.
That's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up pretty soon.
We talked about that.
So I'd like to offer my obeisances to everyone. Vanchakalpa Trubhischa. Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi.
Hari
Just
Bol.
Krishna.
You put a lot of words in.